What's going on, guys? First of all, if you like these videos that I do and if you guys want to stay tuned to the latest giveaways that we have in the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So I know it's been a while since I posted my last video, and that's because I've been really busy with the house at the moment, but right now I have more free time and I'm able to do more videos for you guys. So yes, this is a follow-up video of the Mini-ITX build that I built for the previous video. And if you guys haven't seen that video yet, make sure you check it out right here. Yes, it's right there. Just click that right there. Okay, so we're going to be doing benchmarks of the Ryzen 5 2400G with the cooler that I had in the build, which is the Noctua. It's the low profile cooler. I'm only very limited to, the choices of coolers that I have for this Chopin case because it's very small. But yes, so for these benchmarks throughout the video, please take note that these results are based on the RAM frequency being set at 3200 megahertz, and this is the Corsair Vengeance LPX. I know in my previous video it was probably the Team Group Elite. I actually changed that for the LPX. Now guys, just so you know, just as a disclaimer, this is not a tutorial on how you should overclock yours, okay? These results or these settings are specifically for my system, and if I am comfortable with my 4 gigahertz at 1.4 volts, then that's just how I want it. Because the reason I'm saying this is your processor may not perform as well, or it may be even better, and if that's the case, good for you. Okay, so for the overclock settings, again, we have the CPU at 4 gigahertz at 1.4 volts, and we have the integrated graphics at 1525 megahertz at 1.2 volts. So now you know what the settings are for the processor, what exactly is going on with the system, and let's move to the benchmarks. Starting off with Cinebench R15, we have a score of 793 for stock settings and over 10% jump with the overclock settings, which scored 884, which is great. The Delid didn't seem to help much with the score, but helped lower temps up to 10 degrees Celsius, as you guys can see in the charts. And that means we have the performance of overclock settings with the temperatures below stock settings. With OpenGL, we scored 65 frames per second with stock settings compared to 72 frames per second with the overclock settings. This is with the integrated graphics set to 1525 megahertz with a 2 gig frame buffer. So with 3D Mark Firestrike, the difference seems to be pretty consistent with the total and the graphics and CPU scores, which is around 11 to 12%. With the thermals, we're experiencing the same 9 degrees drop in temperatures with the Delid compared to the overclock settings. Same goes for Final Fantasy 15 with the lowest benchmark settings. We're looking at a 12% increase overall, and this is all still categorized as very low according to the score. As for our frames per second during the entire benchmark, even with the lowest settings, we're still not able to hit 30 frames per second, which is a little disappointing. Moving on to actual gaming benchmarks. Now, guys, these footages or gameplays are not the actual results from the Ryzen 5 2400G. And the reason for that is while I'm recording, my frames drop significantly. So for these charts, we will have red, green, and blue. Red representing the minimum frames per second, green being the average frame per second, and blue being the maximum frames per second. So for Dota 2, the performance doesn't really increase by much even if overclocked. At this point, it's almost not worth overclocking. As you guys can see, the minimum frames per second goes from 39 at stock to 31 overclocked, and even the average frames per second, the only difference is 3 frames, which doesn't really make overclocking worth it. Do note though that this is the highest settings at 1080p. For Fortnite, high preset settings at 1080p, we have 43 frames per second with stock settings and 45 frames per second overclock settings. Again, not a big difference at all. And if you guys put your settings to medium presets, then you will shoot up to 60 frames per second, maybe more or less, but definitely playable. So for PUBG, 1080p, very low settings. The difference is now much better, and overclocking can definitely be more appreciated here. As you guys can see, we go from 38 frames per second average to 45, which is a better jump than the previous games. But what's very important here is the minimum frames per second coming from 8 to 34. I also experience much less stuttering with the overclock settings. So with Monster Hunter World, which is a game that I personally play myself, the improvement doesn't seem to be much. It's very similar to the previous games such as Fortnite and Dota 2, where there's not much improvement. However, in the minimum frames, you can see it come from 28 frames per second, jump to 37 frames per second when overclocked, which makes it somewhat worth it. So that's it for today, guys. I'm actually very impressed with the performance of the Ryzen 5 2400G. It's definitely able to give me what I need for my HTPC. Again, guys, this is not an overclocking guide, so please don't follow the settings that I have. It may not work for you, and it could potentially void the warranty of your processor. All that being said, let me know how your Ryzen 5 2400G performs and your overclock settings down in the comments below. And don't forget the case giveaway, it will be in the description down below as well. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.